Dog days of summer. The Doge crickets. The Doge days of summer. The Doge of war. America, the battlefield land. Home of the slave. Land of the fee. We've really been duped, and duped good. If you don't believe that, please look around. It's right around us. But as things are going, as I say, there's this dark storm that's upon us, and going to get a little bit worse at least, if not a lot worse. I'm always looking for that silver lining, because we have one little out, and that's what we choose. It's our free will. Whatever that free exercise of that free will gives to us. And you'd think it would be some pretty clear-cut thing that if you thought you were free and you had free will to exercise it, you want to put it in a place where it's more peaceful, left to your own creativity, and to move forward and to help what you think is people around you. You better think again, because that's not really how this thing has all been set up. So, welcome behind the Woodshed. Never forget. We have 911. Never forget, folks, what you learn behind the Woodshed. And I hope you don't. I've been doing this thing for quite a few years. I've been trying to bring out the principles, and by utilizing the notice we get that most people call the news, I recognize that there was all the clues that they wanted us to know about were there, whether they were the truth or the lie. It's given to you in spades. And so our job, if we wish to accept it, if we wish to really stand up in our own right and really exercise the free will we were required to exercise anyway, and what is taken advantage of when you don't exercise it, is that tacit procuration doctrine. When you are silent, those that impose believe that you've consented. That's the rule I haven't set up. That's the rule of the world. The other problem is you don't have to be wrong to be attacked. You don't have to be doing wrong to be attacked. And as I say, I reference like Cain versus Abel. When brother kills brother, we're a troubled people. We really are a troubled people. And so, as I don't don't really cite the Bible so well, I've read it a few times. It gave me a lot of insight. It gave me a lot more insight after I learned about legal language, meta language. There's a whole other thing you start seeing when you start having this new vocabulary. I never was one much to learn foreign languages, though I really wish I did, because I wanted to communicate with lots of people in the world. Those that I met around the world that actually could communicate in my language, which was American, not English, because I live in America, not in England. It was American. I could talk with them because they could communicate with me. And I found lots of people in the world to be very nice, very cool, very, very interesting. And so I was disappointed that I didn't have the focus to be able to pick up languages. I tried. I've got a couple of them in me that I just never exercised. And then eventually I found out that there's a whole other set of languages right in my own country that I didn't understand. And when I started to see those, I started to understand the real importance of the languages that we were having to deal with that are already attacking us. That then opened my eyes as well to other things. You start reading in a different way. You start responding in a different way. So, again, going to the Bible and Cain versus Abel, I looked at, well, that's just the explanation of our fallen nature. And there's proof positive. You can live in peace and someone will come and attack you, even your own brother. That you just start to settle into a reality that whether you lived in a little utopia like maybe I did a long time ago, I believe what I was told about you can rise up and get whatever you want. Didn't realize that was really much of a lie because all the fix was in before. Didn't understand it. I don't even know if I fully appreciate some of this, but I do know it's there, and that's the part I appreciate, that there's some things we can do about the world and there's some things that we can't. But we can certainly learn principles. That's what I bring behind the Woodshed, I hope, in a slightly different way. Maybe not so formally organized, but I think organized enough. As I periodically get people to discuss things with me, they come to me and say, now I'm starting to get what you've said in these areas on these things. They now start to make sense. And I kind of liken it just to the ability to read, like I said, get the black and white in your eyes, understand what it's telling you, don't understand what you're told that it's telling you, understand what it is telling you, and where it comes from, and where you can find that it comes from, and maybe all the ways of where it might be coming from, so that you expand your awareness. And you start to connect dots that you never saw before. Things are less transparent to you. Things are less able to get by you. There is no ghost in the machine, because you see it's a machine that's actually programmed to deceive you. Once you see that, there's a whole other thing goes on. It's a whole awareness and consciousness flip. Literally, I've told you before, when you get on the path of this stuff, your mind, I've talked to people, so I know it happens. It wasn't just me. That your brain literally feels like it's flipping. It's turning inside out. It feels like there's a physical thing going on. And I guarantee right after that happens, you cannot unsee what you've now brought yourself to awareness. That I ask you, don't stop learning what you need to know, and don't just take anybody's word for it. Why I reduce my conversation with you is to let me lead you to the path at the head of the trailhead that I think I've gone down, that I believe I've been down sufficiently to come and tell you, yeah, there's a trail there and you'll find some stuff. This is what I found. You now to go down there, and then you can do your journey. If you come back my way, we can share what we then now understand, and you can point out to me what I didn't see when I went down. But you will go down and you will learn something. That simple suggestion seems to be very difficult for people. Not a lot of people actually take that journey. And that's a little bit of a frustration, because to me, when I've seen how many journeys I've gone these trails to go ferret out this thing that we're up against, we always come to the stinking abyss. And when we come there, metaphorically, there's people standing there, others like us, that are standing shoulder to shoulder looking at the same thing, describing the same creature. It doesn't exist. It's just an idea. But it does exist in its function that you have to see for yourself. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you know. This is what knowing is. It's not just thinking that you know some tidbit of information. It's a knowing. It's almost a complete grasp. Notwithstanding that maybe we don't know it all the time, but we can be far enough into the wilderness, if you will, to have studied that wilderness enough to know where all the parts are, and then cognize what that means and what that might mean and its place amongst others. So until you go there, you don't have a clue. And so this is really the land of the clueless, and the clueless sound like crickets, because the clueless won't respond. And the serious part about this is it's not a judgment, folks. It's just what happens. If you're clueless to something, even in a denial, you may hear it, you may respond to something, but if you're clueless to an underlying truth, you're clueless to the question. Because if your response to something new is to fight instead of inquire, you've lost the question why. And if you lose the question why, you're pretty well toast. And I don't mean just asking why to be able to say I qualified my point by asking why. I mean, once you ask the question, you're opened up now to the having to prove it. That's a big question. That you're no longer clueless. That I see lots of cluelessness that allows us to see what we're going on and what we're doing. So you'll hear me reference little sources of information that brought truths, and I tend to just touch on the Bible. It's a book that has truths in it. I also find I'm greatly troubled by the book, and greatly troubled that men made it, and greatly troubled by the men that were connected behind the men that made it, to know that I've got to be really, really, really careful, because another document called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion gives me notice if I was clueless to it before, I was accepting of the fact that someone else could delineate really an operating plan of opportunism for the con artists and the scam artists and the snake oil salesmen. That I'm susceptible. All of us are susceptible to. That I found are being exploited at every point. And more. Once you see this, you start seeing that there's even more that was written. And so I ask you not to get into any prejudices while you're on your journey, because it's just going to it'll put a blinder on you at the point you might need to be able to see all the way around you, up and down and all around. And then into the other dimensions, if I can say it that way. That this religious thing is in the world, whether we want to believe in it, or whether we want to be an atheist and misfocus our attention on God. There's people that do believe it, and there's people that will act to come against you. They're not even in the capacity of your brother now, and they wish to harm you, and they wish to make you kneel. And if we're blind to those signs, if we've got these, what I would consider at that point psychopaths, when they wanted to take away your free will, you either give it up by not doing and responding to it, or you step up. And you have to defend yourself, whether you win or lose. I mean, lose your existence here. Whether you lose your property here. That's essentially losing your existence. And so I've also brought what I thought have been, what I think works, at least for what we do, methods of approach against this, these very variated and various gradable eviles. Because essentially, once you have an objective basis, and the one that has the apparent authority denies it, you're looking at a criminal. The extension of which and the continuation of an allowance of which just makes you living in a world of criminals. And that becomes the norm. And that's a real interesting problem. But let me get to something that becomes norms to us, that we have dots to connect, that show things working in the world that are underneath the sight of us and more tangibly, but that are in our face, that I've talked to you about. I was going to be getting to it. Well, I've got to get to it because I realize the big month is here. The thing I told you was coming is here. It's here. That exposes and expands another bum's rush in earnest that I need to get to and talk to. In organizations that are in place, that have been in place for a long, long time, long before any of all of us, in the country, United States, and globally, that I want to focus now on a couple of documents. And before I get to that, let's bring up a little kind of religious, interesting little religious connections, and not knowing their connections, but seeing the coincidence, not knowing the meaning, but seeing the coincidence. There's a report here yesterday that happened. The Hajj will go on. Religious leaders confirm Islam's mass pilgrimage to Mecca goes ahead this month, despite a crane disaster killing 107 people there yesterday. This is that big, it's the largest, the grand mosque of the Islamic faith. Everyone shows up, and you see them in pictures. They walk around, and they do their, whatever it is. I don't even know about what the religion does. But the crane that collapsed was struck by lightning in a storm. Belongs to a German crane company operated by the Bin Laden family consortium, who are headed the expansion of the Holy Mosque. They're going to expand this thing. This is happening at the time of the Hajj. They're going to expand this thing to be able to hold something like 2.2 million people at one point, all at once. That the Bin Laden family is involved in this. That lightning strikes from above, whether or not that's government caused or the creator of the universe, I don't know, but I find that fascinating. It's just a coincidence, don't know the meaning. Saudi Bin Laden Group was founded, the company that's doing this, by Osama Bin Laden's billionaire father Mohammed, and the sprawling construction conglomerate runs a large amount of major building contracts in the Sunni kingdom. So, to me, in a way, it's a big news, and I'm sorry to hear all these people that died. There was 200 and something, 80 people that got hurt. This crane comes tumbling down. Now, there's been some people talking about this being part of Revelations and speaking of the millstone being thrown in the ocean. I don't think so. If this crane would have fallen that cube in the middle of the Hajj, yes. We thought maybe that's the millstone that got struck and theoretically thrown out. But more important, the connection I was looking at, it was in Osama bin Laden's family building this religious facility, and it was struck by lightning on 9/11. I don't know what it means. Just find the coincidence interesting. Another thing that's crumbling that I've been talking about, and lots of people are, I'm not the only one now. I've been talking to you about the powers in the world, the things that are apparent that we have to use and are affected by every day, that run transparent to our observations, that this thing in the international specter called the financial markets that we heard just last week. I was talking about Putin creating a regional market that I said is tied in. That's the regional tied into the sustainable development condition of governance. This week now, the report comes out. Remember, the BRICs was the antagonist, I was saying, to the IMF, which would allow them to continue to advance the global financial structure, the economic plunder of the world, literally. That I said, be careful, the BRICs is a setup, that all this thing that we claim to believe is different, or we're told to believe is different, is really not. That the people that are running BRICs inside are really part of the originating structure of the IMF, and we've reported on all that. I've reported on all that behind Woodshed. But this week we come out and we hear one of the members of BRICS, the B, Brazil, has been reduced to junk as the BRICS facade crumbles. So internally to the BRICS, there's no protection. This is all. The whole world's going to be adjusted here. It's just theft, is what it ends up being, and it's theft because people continue to speculate in it. The leader over there, Dilma Rousseff, has squandered Brazil's commodity boom, but the country is not in a meltdown and is unlikely to set off an emerging market crash. Brazil's currency has plummeted to an all-time low, and borrowing costs have tightened viciously after Standard & Poor's slashed the country's debt-to-junk status. Now, that's the Americans, right? This is all internal to the financial structure, putting a status on this in this country that's the fix is in. So you see the manipulation continuing to go on, but see the West not worried about it because it's able to continue to pay its debt load. This sovereign debt load. And this becomes very important. Remember what I'm saying here, because if I get to the document eventually here today, after I do the setup on who this other organization is that I've been wanting to speak to by their documents, you'll see it's spoken in the thing that's coming down upon this nation now, the United States of America, and the globe. It has been on the globe. This thing called sustainable development that I've been telling you is actually an economic plunder, not necessarily environmental. It's there. Those are the tools of destruction, if you will. That you're going to see that the whole point of sustainable development, one of the major goals is to saddle people with debt. So remember this fix is in by Standard & Poor's. They're just a company in the United States. Sets junk status on a whole nation. If you think there was actual sovereignty here under debt situations, that causes a major question within the BRICS, and showing you it's really not unconnected, and that there isn't just an independence in the world at all. Even if they intended to be independent, they weren't. All the truly independent people are being killed. Anybody that wants to go to, let's say, gold and silver-based currencies, interestingly and ironically, like the religion of Islam requires, and is completely against usury, and again, a player in the world ostensibly is against usury, the Catholic Church, made contracts with the Jewish people and the Jewish faith, who don't have the restriction on usury, to go ahead and charge usury to its own believers. Didn't condemn it, just went ahead and used them as an agent to continue the plunder. That the BRICS is, the inside of the BRICS are hollow. They're crumbling. They're probably made of sand themselves. And I wanted you to point out, as I've been moving these things along on this economic condition that looks like something else, and the layers of the onion are all being regurgitated and re-brought together now as we move into a time when they're going to make this bum's rush upon the world underneath the banner of sustainable development and warm and fuzzy fighting poverty. While they throw you into austerity, they're going to claim to be fighting poverty. No one should be in poverty, but they should be in austerity. Understand, austerity now is social justice, equally bringing everybody into a manageable amount of utility. Well, except for a few that are in control, obviously. So keep connecting all these things because they're relevant, and you have to make your own importance to them. I'm speaking internationally here, but they are coming into the country. If you haven't paid attention to all that sustainable development has been embraced since way long ago by the United States government, and every agency of the government is told on the executive branch to implement it. This was denied as a law in the United States, as a treaty, as a valid agreement by the Senate back in, I think it was 94. And so what they called it soft law. This is just legalized plunder is all it is. They call it soft law, was the implementation of the very same thing without the treaty. And so they then said that this condition that they put on is just an influence, and it's not a mandate. And that's supposed to make it all right. I'm telling you that that means that they're playing the game of tacit acceptance. As long as you keep being quiet, you'll agree to their consensus. And I've told you again, as we've now analyzed this, consensus is essentially theft by extortion. It's a felony. And so I want you to remember these things. I hope you're taking notes. I mean, this is a list of things that you need to actually understand so that you can keep focus on how you can cut through this nonsense and look through the words to see they're telling you what they're doing. That gives you their plan that you then can go look and find out because of the plan and where they need to go. I'm looking for the things to trip them up and stop them, essentially, to kill it. You need to kill this. You need to stop what they're doing. This Pope came up real big and strong this year. And I told you early on, here it comes, folks. This is the year. Yeah, so I didn't know what was going to happen. I just know that it was going to happen. And here we are at the end of the year. It's coming on. And coincidentally, without knowing what the meaning is, why, but here it is, we get now headlines speaking to this interaction that's going to happen in 2 weeks, and why I need to get onto this other documentation. The Pope versus America was an article that pops up to plant the seed that we have there's literally a war here. See, the word versus, usually we put it in gameplay, but it's not. This is, for the United States, this would be a civil war between parties that we would be mitigated in courts, supposedly of law. This is a big deal. The little headline, the Pope versus America. If he's in peace, why is he versus anybody? Unless what he's actually not. He actually is infallible, which we've proven he's not, and his infallibility is against what America stands for. And if America stands for something that's evil, then why have we got here without anybody noticing? And then what's so evil about it? Well, they did say the America. They didn't say United States. And I'll make a distinction. I hope you do too, and I hope you make the right one. But this is setting up an antagonism. This is setting up a battle. It's a fictional mind battle that they're going to start to weigh in favor of the Pope. Because they need to downplay, they need to destroy, like the Confederate flag was the symbol of independence in the South, they need to downplay what America, the symbol of America, is in the world, which they misrepresent. And this article is very interesting in how they do that and how they explain this thing and the misrepresentations that go on. I'm only going to read a small passage of this just to point out a couple things and move on. You need to get this. I'll have it in the Blogcaster. As someone who just recently found the Blogcaster said, oh, wow, I see how that's, I didn't realize that this was all tied together. I understand now how that works with these links as they were reading through and listening to the broadcast. Once you see more of what I can talk about on the broadcast, you start to see really that this thing really plays out the way it's supposed to be, or the way it is, and that it's explained before we even get there. That these are not just stories out there; these are the realities that we have to be addressing. And it's so mind-boggling. We're infiltrated and surrounded so much. It is overwhelming if you think that you have to address it all. And so I've had to reduce my addressments to responses, understanding core responses that go after their core values. And mine is the law. I can destroy them pretty quickly that way. And then I can pass those techniques onto any subject matter that I've found out, trying to find an efficient way to address this. And I pass that on to anybody who's willing to accept it. I offer that freely. I have been over for years. So it's there, and when I say that, I say that there's the silver lining's absolutely there. The brass ring, if I can call it that, to grab is there for us. We just have to go do it. We can't remain silent. There's a little discussion here that I wanted to focus on in this article. It says, but there is another key understanding the Pope's worldview. There's another key to understanding the Pope's worldview. His predecessor, Pope Benedict the 16th, was above all a theologian. Pope John Paul II, before that, was originally an actor and philosopher. But Francis trained as a scientist. One of his adages is, quote, facts are more important than ideas. Facts are more important than ideas. The intersection of these two threads in Francis's life, his sympathy for the poor and his insistence that the reality comes before theory, help account for how the United States and its unrestrained capitalism have come into the papal crosshairs. Now he's a hunter, the peaceful one. Kind of makes you sick to think about Obama was given the Nobel Peace Prize. This is how these people work. First of all, he says that reality comes before theories. Exactly what I've told you. You have to identify the reality because their theories suck at best. Their crimes at worst. Or worse than that, they're the evil, which I believe this is. That they claim that they know what reality is here. This article promotes that he knows what reality is against the United States' unrestrained capitalism, which doesn't exist. We do not live in unrestrained capitalism at all. You can't when you live in a debt-based system. Impossible. But this is the scene. This is Act 5, Scene 2. After he comes on the stage in January, this is now what they're putting in. Now this is a hunting party. And the United States is in the crosshairs for its unrestrained capitalism that doesn't and hasn't existed for a long time. If it did, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be working my mining claim, with my property rights without being attacked because law would rule to protect me even against the government. The fact of which doesn't exist tells you that we're in a war that we better step up to. That the fact of which I cannot put my capital in. You want to call it human capital? I can't put my private capital of my own work, though I'm granted to do so, into the land to extract something that society needs and is acknowledged at a very high level, even national security level. I am restrained from doing that, putting my own private capital into my work to extract something for society. That would be capitalism. And I agree to do that work for my room, whatever that returns to me. Substance for substance. That would be capitalism. So we do not have unrestrained capital. But I wanted to point out this is a very interesting, and I highlighted this one paragraph and I'll move on. But I want you to understand they set the frame within which you will now be constrained to you will be at liberty. You will be within the freedom of this constraint, this dialogue constraint, to think. If you accept this premise, that I ask you don't do that. Condemn this whole passage, condemn everything you see about the explanation of this guy, and start finding out what they really do so you don't even buy in to the belief that has been set up for the fall and the crosshairs to be pointing at a target they can kill. He says facts are more important than ideas, and then they touch on reality. Facts are more important than ideas. He's talking about reality as the fact, not theory. What's climate change, folks? It's not even a theory. It's just this wispy idea that cannot be conformed. But this guy's going to come in, and he's already written the encyclical anticipating that he's going to embrace it. It's one of the tools of something greater. That I want to point out that this scientist of all, I didn't know this. This is why it kind of fascinates me. This is a scientist talking with a papal hat. And he's now claiming that facts are more important than ideas, yet accepting the fact of the fraud that's been promoted as climate change to be something. As a scientist now. I would have to tell you he's not much of a scientist. And so, that's another lie. He's a trained scientist, it says, but he didn't learn much, apparently. And so, I want to just highlight this. I'll move on now. I mean, there's a lot. I just get lost in all this stuff to say. I see all these words that I can respond to. Remember, right before they said Pope John Paul II, I need to hit this and I'll move on, was originally an actor and philosopher. He was an actor. Don't miss the truth of some of this. But they're promoting things, and I want you to cut through that. This guy that's coming to America to put that's in the United States he says is in the crosshairs. You notice they didn't say America. That'd be against the people. He's not going to go after us, even though he's targeting us. He's actually targeting us through the United States, the legal entity. but they set up a false frame within which they will constrain your thoughts if you allow it, that I wanted to point out. Another story coincident to this was another interesting little story. We always consider, we've been told, like, the Jews own Hollywood, the Jews do this, the Jews do that, and I've told you to be careful to put too much weight in some of this. Yes, there may be an overrepresentation in lots of places, but remember, the Catholic Church used the Jews to be able to charge usury to its own believers, because it couldn't underneath its own doctrines. That we also talked, and I said, be careful of who's controlling. Remember, the general always sits behind the scenes of the Pope. That the general can act contrary to even the Pope, and it's lawful. Why? Because the general is protecting the state. That we look at the general, who appears to be the Jesuit order, military order. That I want to point out a little bitty detail that just popped up out of nowhere. I don't know why it pops up, why it interests me. I see a title and I go after it. And again, there's a voice, if you will. There's an inkling, there's an insight, there's an intuition that you don't negate in yourself, that guides you to certain things, to give you certain more awarenesses. That I found an interesting little story talking about someone I don't even have a clue about, don't care about him, don't think about him, not part of my life. I don't have a TV, I would never see him. I guess in YouTube we'd know about it. I've seen him here and there. He's supposed to be a comedian. He's in show business. Now, if the Jews own show business, I want to know how this guy is where he is doing what he's doing. As the title of the article is, The Question Stephen Colbert Wants to Ask the Pope Francis. Colbert has reportedly been trying to arrange a meetup with Pope Francis during the pontiff's trip to the United States. Now, why? What is this? Who is this guy? Who do you think he is against everybody else? And if the Jews were not totally against, if they were totally against the Pope at some point, why would they want him being on there if they're ruling the airwaves, if they're ruling the media, and they have a say over all this? Why would they even want to have that exposure to a belief system contrary to theirs? That he is doing this anticipates the fact that he might actually give a try. That actually might be something on the horizon to see. But I went down and I found this little statement about Colbert. Colbert, it says, is no slouch when it comes to evangelizing. Think about this. He's in a position of media that he's actually knows. He's an evangelizer of apparently the Catholic faith, because he's Catholic. That's okay. I'm not talking about his belief system. I'm talking about the position of control and authority here. Who would control his ability to go and do this? What's he going to evangelize now? And that he has the ability to do it without much more restriction other than whether the Pope can make the meeting. That's an international state decision of state, not a desire of Colbert's. But Colbert, he taught Sunday school at a New Jersey parish, and he frequently deployed Catholicism for semi-serious fodder for his previous incarnation as a right-wing blowhard on the Colbert Report, on Comedy Central. So they set him up as an antagonist, but he's actually running a class. Parenthetically in this paragraph it says, and he had a Jesuit priest, the Reverend James Martin, as his official chaplain and regular guest. Now, if there was a big battle between the Jews and the Jesuits, that wouldn't happen if the Jews were in control of the media. But it did happen. Colbert is being guided, and they bring this antagonism as a false antagonism to get the verbiage out to you, to plant the seeds they need to plant. That I found this connection at this time with this Pope coming and this guy in this position, I didn't know anything about it, but at this point, is an interesting coincidence. That I believe I see that there's another soft proof that maybe the Jews aren't in such a control as we might think. Yes, they're in the positions to make the say, but remember, they're also contracted to take advantage. And apparently get paid handsomely in this regard. That I don't want you to disregard that possibility, and I would put it more into a probability. That these people in media certainly are propagandists is not the point. Who the players are behind the scenes really is. That I thought this was interesting. Now, I want to get to something that I talked about referencing the Bible. But let me get back to something else that occurred in my mind about looking at this guy called the Pope. And then something flashed in my mind. And it took a little while. I'm not so chaptered and versed about this stuff. But so it took me a little bit more to find it. But I did go and find it. And it was essentially what I had thought. And underneath, what was it? Ephesians 6, it says here, the full armor of God. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye be able to withstand in the evil day. And having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of the peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. I'm not going to analyze all that. If you put those words into the context of today, of what I've been telling you, I've told you have to come stand on the narrow path, which we've told there. I tell you stand on the objective basis, which we find today is the law, and you speak in the right context. It's no different than what I read right there about you have to put on, you speak from the truth and righteousness. It's not just the truth, but it's the truth rightfully applied. That I've explained to you, it's not just knowing a thing, it's properly applying a thing. That I read right there. For those of you that turned the word off, I'm sorry to hear that, but hopefully not. Hopefully you're hearing, we have direction to look at. These things I have found reworded for my life have been very relevant in the truth of how we address this. That you can't, you can't really stand against the proposition that you speak in the truth and you speak with it in the proper context. What they say here is righteousness, as I interpret this. That they also speak to who we're doing this against. And I thought I had it here, and I don't see it. Let me check something. Sorry, just didn't mean to mess that up. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, that's right. And right before that, what we are to do was against whom? And this is where I triggered my mind, why I even came to look this up. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That is where I focused. Spiritual wickedness in high places. Because I was just talking about a guy who wants to get somebody on the television who is part and parcel to the teaching, who wants to evangelize from a Jesuit perspective, this guy that I have identified myself by my research as a spiritual wickedness in high places. When you have even now someone who we now know as a scientist, he's trained to know better, that takes on the mantle of some knowing and authority in high places, and takes a fraud to plunder the world, you're dealing with a spiritual wickedness in a high place. My mind completely went to this as soon as my mind just put that together. That I then found here, how do we fight that? We fight that with the real truth, not the one you fabricate, properly applied. Nothing I've never ever said different in this broadcast. That you need to keep in your mind about how, when it comes down to the wire as it's coming down now, you're going to have the truth, and you're going to have it properly applied to have a ghost of a chance, and hopefully a Holy Ghost of a chance, to prevail against this kind of wickedness. If you don't see the Pope as someone being wicked, I would ask you to do more study. Start looking through this. I won't be speaking to anybody that will not believe that. I'm only speaking to those that are just beyond clueless, that have a question left in them, the why. And I'm giving you the why. I'm giving you the why of the action. This has been found in the Bible. I find it fascinating. I can put that in my life today and say, wow, this is giving me a guidance if I didn't know before. This is giving me a guidance of what I'm going to have to constrain my whole attack on, because this is an attack on me from wickedness. And how much more wicked can it be than people of pomp and ceremony, snake oil salesmen in costumes, coming to take your life and your lands and your creativity, and essentially being free in your free will under multiple frauds. That I found this connection. I'm just kind of going through you with my thought process as I went finding these stories as they came up. They just came up. I noticed them. I just picked them up, so that you understand my train of thought in a way, the train of thoughts that went along to get us till today, that gets us to the documents I've been wanting to do and talk to you here for a few weeks. In the time, it never came before this way. It's coming in a few weeks before this very serious demarcation happens in the world. And I'm not speaking prophetic here. I'm speaking, I only know it by the news I see, by the international law I found, by knowing these things are real despite their transparency to most other people. That we now transition from this wickedness in high places to those that would aid and abet it. And I've told you this passage again, another truth. Again, I'm not going through and trying to put it all in context. I'm saying that there's truths that pop up. I've learned to read articles. When you see the capacity of something, or you see the weakness stated in something, we have a problem here, we have a challenge to do this. You better focus on what their challenge is, and you better focus on making sure that challenge is stuck in their face. You have to start reading between the lines of what's actually being said. That this is kind of how I've finally approached the Bible. That I really can't. There's lots I cannot trust in it. There's lots that made no sense. There's lots I found that would make no sense when you knew the underlying actual meaning of the words being used at the time are not what's being conveyed today, are not the thought you get. That I've had to kind of, in a way, cherry pick these passages. But again, if I pick them up in truth, apply them in the right way, the righteousness, the righteous application, I probably will be protected. I have that armor. I have that protection, that shield. And I think we can agree with that. Regardless of the source of what I'm talking about, I think the principle that we're learning here, we know in our hearts inside, is correct. That if I am speaking in truth and in righteousness, it will shield me. Whether or not that shield is big enough to stop someone from pummeling me physically, well, that's a different question. But I am not going to be found out to be distrustful, certainly, or to be a deceiver. And we're dealing with grand deceivers here. That I want to point out again, I've mentioned this before, and this I learned a long time ago. I found it and applied it a long time ago. It was really kind of mind-opening as to what we're up against in this thing that's transparent to us in all the world. That we give it authority, we believed that it was something to regard, that it came in all good nature and supposed goodwill, and a group which we sued because we found out they're not. They're criminals. They're treasonous. They're committing treason. They're committing worse. They're advancing wickedness in high places. And here's the passage in Luke 11:52. And I really focus on these because I want you to know this is not really my opinion. These are some tools out there that we can use. And once we start using them, they do something in our life today to help us and aid us. Staying on the narrow path of the mining law and making sure no negative deception comes in on that the trueness of the disposal has protected what we do as a shield over and over and over and over again. There's nobody that can speak contrary to the simple language in that law that did a simple thing that we can't identify from a long way off that protects that and protects us when we're in that. That I'm suggesting to you, this is pretty powerful stuff when you finally start applying it. The passage of Luke 11:52, "Woe to you lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You yourselves did not enter, and you hindered those who were entering." Now, what is the word representation, if not that you yourself did not enter? When you represent another as an attorney, a lawyer does. I make a differentiation. If you're in the law, you're a lawyer. These other people are attorneys. They attorn. They are the agent of the state that mediate in favor of the state for some issue. And don't you see that in the lawyers today in their associations being agencies of the state, officers of the state courts in not only in every capacity, between the legislative councils advising the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. That this passage, if you don't understand how powerful it really is, and it explains exactly what you're in for when you walk into their courts, and I said their courts, you don't have a clue. If you avoid them because it's their courts, you don't have a clue again. Because as I've shown through our lawsuit, again, I was a principal party, a co-party to my colleague, and a co-party to an assembly of others similarly situated, as we said it in our statement, the Jefferson Mining District, that we sued in a particular way to out this obstruction and this representation that serves no one but that system. So I'm not speaking from opinion necessarily. I guess I have a thought about it, but I'm speaking here from the truth, the facts, the reality, properly applied, or as I could conceive myself to be part of that application. That I'm not talking about hyperbola. I'm not speaking about the next new solution. I'm not telling you, let's all happy time, kumbaya, let's sing around the forest fire. Yeah, that's what they're doing now. I'm talking about very specific identities in the world, characters in the world that have put up a facade, a charade that most people buy into, and our job is to be able to see it, first of all, not have it be transparent to it, and to respond to it. That when you find out that they're only going to be representative, and their system can only be representative, then you find out how to defeat it because it isn't a principle, is what we set up in our court filing, and they would not enter. That's what I say. I don't know if you appreciate what happened. They would not enter into even answer. There was a ton of reasons why that. It wasn't just because they didn't want to answer us. They were a fiction in a fictional system, and we invoked the substantial need of a real court, a real remedy. See, everyone talks about straw man. They don't actually put it into application. They use a straw man as a weakness. Well, if you're not a straw man, why is it a weakness? Why do you even address it? Why don't you just call it out for the fraud and then move against those that theft by extortion under color of authority impose that limitation on you? That's pretty simple. Hope you're taking notes here. I feel like I'm on a roll, although I'm going to slow down because I'm going to start reading. Because I'm going to read about this condition right here. That we have the lawyers that says right here, woe unto you, you lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge, the thing I tell you to go find. And you yourselves, those that have taken away that key, have not entered in. And those of you that did not enter in, you've hindered those of us that tried to enter with the knowledge. Is our system today. It's been the system forever, if I can just say it that way. And if you don't understand that, you just got to do more research until you come to that awareness. And you're going to be kind of ineffective until you come to that awareness. And along the trail of the path that you're following down to solve this problem, the answers like I got will come to you. And if not, I'm markonthebeast@yahoo.com. I'll point you around. I don't want to be your brains. I want you to bring, this is BYOB behind the woodshed. I haven't said that for a long time. Bring your own brain. You're going to need it. And boy, oh boy, what an awareness. Kind of fun to actually, it's kind of disconcerting of it, but it's kind of fun to have your brain turn over in your head. While you start to, all of a sudden, when it quits flicking around, you get a boom in your head, and then you start realizing there's a whole nother way to look at this stuff. That doesn't happen as a spectator. You're not going to get the same. You're not going to get the same effect unless you're inside the game on the field, getting blasted by somebody 10 times bigger than you, or actually doing the maneuver that drops him on his face, and you run down and you get your touchdown. If I could put it in a game analogy. Point is you have to be involved. Even when I was doing video for PEG access. It's a whole different thing when you're down with a camera on your shoulder on the sideline and you got 4 or 5 guys coming off an end around and they're going to kind of run you over. How do you get through that? It's a whole lot different than if you were up in the stands watching that, I can tell you. How do you get the shot and not get killed? That's a pretty cool thing to try and figure out. And when you do, you feel pretty good about it. Especially when you see your shot and everyone's exclaiming, wow, that looked like it came right into my living room when you did that. Okay, well, I won't show you the bruises all over me, but yeah, I did get the shot, and I did stand there, and I did make the next shot and the shot after that. Because I was there, and I had to deal with it. So, more to the point here. We have a system that was created by those of woe upon us, and we can accept it if we want. Or we can decide it's something else. So, as we move along, not my opinion, from the words of the Bar Association itself, explaining to themselves what it has to do and where it's got to go in the world, I'm going to now read some major parts of some documents to explain to you this has been a plan. It has been a plan long before we even knew about it. If those of you in the so-called truth movement and all that, long before Ron Paul, long before me, long before a lot of us. But that this organization, the lawyers of woe upon us, and the ones that would obstruct us, once we knew, we got the knowledge, and they would obstruct us. This is their judges now. I figured out a way to get around those guys too. And their administrators as well. It's all in our court case that no one can see. It's amazing. It's amazing what they do to your set. But see, we got all the files, so we know what we've done. And we'll be, again, we have to execute on the enforcement. That's coming. What we see now, the criminals that come to play to get in our face over it, I'm not so sure. We'll see. But there's a way to look at what you're told, even in the Bible, that gives you the clues. Because you didn't want to remain clueless. You developed a question in earnest to resolve a very serious wrong in your life that you wanted to make right, or for somebody else. And that's kind of where it's gone for me. For me, it's selfish for me. I have to do it for me. But I noticed it's affecting everybody. I'm in a core problem. And you will be too once you start resorting to your intention that I think we're maybe here for. I'd rather do otherwise. I'd rather enjoy myself. But that's not the world. So let me move over. The lawyers now. I call them attorneys. These are just legal entities, snake oil salesmen on a system of scam and scheme and artifice, as you'll find out. Scheme and artifice, as it's talked about in the United States Code. From the American Bar Association, adopted by the House of Delegates, August 11 to 12, 2003. Okay, now, what I'm going to talk about here, just two or three points. This is what they focus on. And they're going to mention something called the Model Business Corporation Act, which I've mentioned to you before, which I think about 26 states adopted. So when you hear mention of these corporate structures, understand there's at least, all the states actually are under this, but 26 actually adopted it in name. Although they didn't name it, they called it a bill, they didn't name it. That when you hear the Model Business Corporation Act, and these are acting through that, understand when they talk about states and governments, they're talking about working through the Model Business Corporation Act, which it. That gender neutral can't be now insulted because we don't have to worry about whether or not you're confused and abused. The legal entity, it has fabricated and installed and supplanted into your government, from which and through which it acts to destroy you, as well as bringing on all this other stuff. This document of 2003 says, resolve that the Bar Association adopts and endorses the following corporate governance practices. Governance practices. This is the Bar Association. This is the rule of law as I describe it, and this is global. This is as I tell you, going through the IBAnet.org, this Bar Association is a member of that one, and that organization is the advisor and influencer to the Holy See, the Pope. In the UN, as a non-state influence, that they resolve and endorse the following corporate governance practices. 1, the board of directors of the public corporation must engage in active, independent, and informed oversight of the corporation's business and affairs, building its senior management. The board of directors of the public corporation. how can that not be but a state underneath a supplantation under the Model Business Corporation Act? That doesn't speak to there. We're going to get there, but it talks about that's what governance is. It's to engage in active, independent, and informed oversight, independent of even the law, independent of accountability to whatever the law might be, independent of even your rights. If you start understanding the power that they believe they're taking, well, they've taken it. You don't know that they're taking it. If you believe the arrogance of these people to claim this, and the scope under which these words actually start to work, you'll start to appreciate how really duped and done you already are, and how big really the effort is we're going to have to amass. But actually, I've already explained it, how simple it is to defeat. So number 8, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I want to cut through some important things. They now mention it. Underneath corporate governance, of which I think 26 or so states have adopted as their establishment now, supplanting the permanent laws of the people, they have the Model Business Corporation Act and the general corporation laws of the states, and the courts interpreting and applying the duties of direction should more clearly delineate the oversight responsibility of directors generally and the unique role that independent directors play in discharging the responsibility in public company settings. Listen to this. Did you hear it? The independent directors. That's independent of what you thought was de jure, because they're talking of the supplanted model over your government. And these people are making a resolution in 2003 to endorse these principles that they're moving forward with. 11, the court. You heard the last one I talked about the courts. The courts are involved. Well, we already know that because the Bar Association is the courts, aren't they? Under the cover of a state authority. Where they come in with their policies and diminish you and your rights, property, remedy, that's a theft by extortion under that same state's law. But getting to 11, and listen to who the players are. This is what our injunction attacked collaterally. We didn't attack them directly. I didn't want to have to fight them. I wanted to be able to hit them through a provision of the law that injunctions allow, that when you enjoin the principle, all those that aid and abet the principle in the wrongdoing that you're seeking to enjoin are also enjoined. You can find that up in injunctions. Then 11, see who's involved here in your life under this policy of Model Business Corporation Act and your state. To have and see that corporate governance is already on you. This is sustainable development as a governance already over you. That the courts, law schools, and law professional organizations such as the ABA should promote awareness of and adherence to the professional responsibilities of lawyers in their representation of public corporations, which you heard before is independent, which you heard before is not before that is even not accountant and beholden to anything but their corporate governance structure. So that's the setup to what these people did in 2003, endorsing governance underneath the Model Business Corporation Act. That includes your courts and the state. You have to understand this. And I mean, there's a two-part proof. Not only is it the way they've established it, but this says that it's over an other authority that's established it. But I now want to start to read a little bit more. And I want to bring this guy coming here in the United States. It's going to promote the encyclical and the Agenda 21 and the sustainable development. I want to put this in context of the rule of law, those controllers and deciders of the seats of decision over your life, the independent ones, the ones that give themselves immunity, if you will. Even if they say they have an obligation and liability, they give themselves an immunity through all the shells of bureaucracy you have to go through to get accountability. So when you start putting all this into play, I hope you see how involved these guys are to destroy your way of life and how well we are infiltrated and surrounded, as I've been always saying, by their own words. They're discussing sustainable development, that they embrace it and have, and that they have in their system is going to promote this throughout the entirety of the system you understand as government. American Bar Association adopted by the House of Delegates August 11th, 12th, 2003. Same year they did the endorsing of the governance principles through the bar to go into your states and your courts. Kind of beats Ron Paul and him talking about the financial system, doesn't it? Kind of beats a lot of people talking about things. Again, not my opinion. This is what we've had. This is what we sued. This is what we enjoined, this system of plunder, this method. To show you beyond a reasonable doubt from their own document that the Bar Association is involved with what the Pope's going to promote here. And they have been. He's just coming to take it now, folks. He's making it. The bum's rush is happening. Resolved that the American Bar Association recognizes the good governance and the rule of law are essential to achieving sustainable development. Now, I'm not sure how I want to do this because I'm going to run out of time. I can already see it. I got a lot to read. I want you to hear it. Most people don't tend to go click on the links. I want you to hear it. I want it on the record that I'm reading it, if nothing else. Maybe this is selfish time. But this is all for y'all, but people have to hear it. Good governance. They're only for good government, not good governance, not government. And the rule of law. That's their system. So good corporate government and their rule is essential to achieving sustainable development. That is just the restatement of their own documents, not the documents of sustainable development that say that this is adjunct policy, not constitutional law, not the laws of the statutes as lawfully derived. That's all that statement, that long statement, good governance and the rule of law, is the statement that this is not constitutional law. And they are going to enforce that to bring on sustainable development. That sentence all by itself, it tells you. I didn't learn it from here. I'm just telling you, as I just now read it, it just occurred to me. It shows you that if you bring the narrow path of the law, you defeat their whole process because they're dealing in governance and their rule. And what our injunction did is it took the law and it interjected the law and said, we're taking out your rule. You are the culprit. You're the actual criminal. But we did it on civil side, so let me not confuse you there. We did civil side. What we did was civil, not criminal. But we know that what they do there, that's a criminality. Because what we said inside the implementation of good governments and rule of law over the lawful establishment of government was to commit a treason, make war on the laws of the United States. Listen, when the Pope comes versus America and he comes in, he puts the United States in the crosshairs, is he not making war on the United States? This guy should be collected up and stuck in military prison when he shows up. Now, I know it was a report, opinion stated, but that's what's going on. And so why not call it out like we have? I told you, if I could get over, I have to actually send him a notice, don't come here, so he knows we're going to be there. We would try to arrest him as a felon for committing sustainable development on this. Taking control of the United States through its military or Obama of the Jesuits. Because he's coming contrary to a default judgment where none of these people would answer, and they are his advisors, this scientist. Further resolved that the American Bar Association reaffirms the 1990, listen to the years, folks, how long back this is going, 1991 commitment. Put this in context of sustainable development. The 1992 Johannesburg meeting that was not the agreement, a convention that was not adopted by the Senate in 1994. So this is how far back the bar has been doing this, notwithstanding the Senate saying they weren't going to allow it ratified as a treaty. That they continued today shows you they're making war on the United States and nobody stops it. Nobody says boo about this stuff. It's right here in their own words. Further resolved that the American Bar Association reaffirms its 1991 commitment to sustainable development and adopts the international accepted concept of sustainable development as recognized as the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in 1992. And subsequent international conferences, simultaneous achievements of environmental protection, economic development, social development, and peace for the present and future generations. How is it peace when they put the United States in the crosshairs? How is it peace when they come against your laws? So this is the verbiage. But you see the three-legged stool, that might be the one dropping in the cesshole, I suppose. I didn't know they had legs. I guess it does. Environmental protection, economic development, and social development is social justice here. That's what you see developing, where psychiatrists will drug your little ones to train them and put them into the human resource development units and capital that they need. Further resolved, the American Bar Association encourages governments, including the United States, federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial bodies, as well as business and non-governmental organizations and other entities, to promote sustainable development, including by adopting and implementing appropriate measures with respect to our own facilities and activities. When you look at the fact that the governments are set up underneath the Small Business Corporation Act, that's all the whole government. But they target United States, federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial bodies. Where does that come from? But the NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act. That local government is where JMD come in, the Jefferson Mining District, and said, we do coordination because this act allows governments, and miners' districts are governments. So we came in and we attacked them as an independent and challenged them to meet their own guidelines. The first of which is that sustainable development is a treason against the laws of the United States. How's that? If you can understand how quick that is and how much they don't like it, if we had a lot more people doing this, this thing, I think, goes away pretty quick. Further resolved that the American Bar Association urges, remember they can't force anything, they get you to put the gun to your head and pull the trigger, urges the United States government to meet the targets and timetables for sustainable development that are contained in the plan of implementation adopted by the World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg, South Africa in September of 2002, that are applicable to the United States and to which the United States agreed. Well, that doesn't meet the light of day for us to know what's applicable, and I can suggest to you not much anything could be applicable since it's not a treaty. And they're not supposed to be going past our laws, but because the executive branch has accepted them for implementation through the agencies, and none of you all want to respond against that, they're winning the day, easy. Further resolved, the American Bar Association should consider and promote sustainable development principles in the work of its entities and encourage communication and cooperative action. Cooperative action among its entities to better understand and promote the principles of sustainable development in relevant fields of law. Well, here they talk about cooperative action. No, if you do that, you come under agency control. They're the agency. If you coordinate, they can't do that. That's your independent power. So listen to what the words are they're using to tell you where they're putting you when you agree to come in, and they urge you and you capitulate to their suggestion. That I will suggest to you that there are no relevant fields of law to assert a fraud, and that the fraud of sustainable development, the plunder, is not a principle. It's a crime. That if you buy into this stuff and you allow this, you're kind of doing what you buy into the Pope's setting of the framework that I read before. Further resolved that the American Bar Association urges international, state, local, tribal, and territorial bar associations to adopt similar resolutions. Now, if you go and you look at the American Bar Association and their affiliate page, you'll see who's involved in this, and it doesn't stop. It goes all the way to the federal judiciary, the district attorneys are involved, your prosecutors are all involved to implement, your judges are involved, the federal bar is involved. They're just go look at the list of the American Bar Association of affiliates. Every one of those entities are involved in your life making decisions over the law, but it's not the law. This is that reflexive condition that I tell you that's already on us I've been talking about recently. Why? Because now it's relevant to you all. If I talked about this long before, you wouldn't even know how to put it together. Now I can tell you, we can see it. We don't have to worry about it. It's right here. At the 1992 UN Conference of Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro, UNSCED, or Earth Summit, the United States and other countries adopted a global plan of action for sustainable development, in parentheses, Agenda 21, for all those deniers out there. See, remember, and I think we'll get to this, in Europe, they said Agenda 21. They didn't tell that to us in the United States. They call it sustainable development. So when we got here and we asked attorneys and lawyers, what about this Agenda 21? They said, we don't know anything about it. Why? Because they need to promote the condition. They're liars. Oh, they are called lawyers, aren't they? Wow, interesting. Isn't that simple? Yeah, so Agenda 21 is in their document, right alongside Sustainable Development in parenthetically, which means it's no different. I'll tell you, it's actually different in the context that Agenda 21 is a program of action. Sustainable Development is the term that encompasses global governance in all of its facets. And there's still another thing behind that, but let's stay out here first and get this done under our belt. The Sustainable Development, or Agenda 21, and is a set of 27 principles to guide the effort, called the Rio Declaration. The Sustainable Development is, quote, socially responsible economic development, close quote. You see right there, I've been telling you, this is economic construct. Social is behavior. This is behavior responsible economic development. And when we get over to 20,000, to the plan of 2030 that the Pope is going to embrace for all the poor folk, he's going to tell you that he wants you in debt. And he wants you to behave about being in debt. Remember this statement. That sustained is a definition. Sustainable development is, equals, means. Beyond means, it is. It's beyond means. Means is just a generality. Is. Right? Sustainable development is, quote. Write this down. This is important. This is your key. And every time they touch a behavior, and they try to modify it, or they attach it to debt or some kind of a monetary condition, you know it's them. That's one of the real fast ones. And most everything you do is both rules and laws are for your behavior, and then your economy and your money system is the development over you. Socially responsible economic development. Socially responsible economic development. Who determines responsible? They. The ubiquitous they do. Your behavior will be responsible based on their regulation to an economic development, you slave. Are you hearing the words, folks? Are you getting it now? I mean, just beyond us talking and thinking we can say all this rhetorically. I'm telling you, this is the Bar Association affirming and confirming to promote and advance this thing, which is sustainable development, which means socially responsible economic development, or you agreeing to be a slave to their benefit, to the benefit of the state. That's what human rights is. Do you see the consistency? I hope, as I'm really interjecting a lot, I'm going to try and get through this anyway. A lot to read. A lot to explain. This is over and over. This again, just so much to decide. That's going to be happening. The door opens up next, and again, 2 more weeks. The bum's rush happens. This is going to come on you. If you haven't been taking your notes and getting ready, folks, I don't know what to say. I don't know how it's coming through. I don't know. I just know that it is coming through. And this is all set up right down to your local governments. And what I've been asking you to go fight locally, because that's where the last bit of implementation is going to be, while you learn how to go up the chain. You go up their feeding chain with the truth properly applied. The armor of God, if I can call it that in the reference to the Bible, the truth righteously applied, correctly applied. That's your shield. Are we going to lose soldiers in the war? Absolutely. But you're going to go down with that knowledge that you're, if you go down. And I'm going to say, if you do it as I've been suggesting you can, I'm not down yet. Do I expect to go down? Well, no, in some regard, no. But is a possibility? Sure, it's a war. Am I fearful? Absolutely not. This is almost exciting. I don't like it, but I might as well, figure out where I'm at in here and figure out what I want to do with it. Do I find myself naked in the wilderness, being infiltrated and surrounded by a bunch of wicked people? And then is my decision just to bury myself in a hole I dig for myself, or do I to figure out I'm going to keep moving? I'm going to go ahead and figure my way through this. And I've chosen somehow for some reason I'm stupid and I'm insane enough to believe I can actually do this. And I think you can too. This is not even a decision. You either have free will or you don't. You either have your property, which is yourself, or you don't. You either have the land that you take your own self and be able to apply it to a plot of land so that you give stability and peace. Remember, peace is having land. That's what the sheriff keeps the peace, keeps your land rights. This guy is coming to destroy that. They talk about land, but they talk about land as you will be told to socially, responsibly deal with it for an economic development that's not to you. Sustainable development is socially responsible economic development, you slave. I hope you're getting this. This is what the Bar Association advances. This is why you can't go and get represented by any of them and expect to have your property rights. That's not going to be conditioned, even if he does it well, or she does it well as a representative, it won't be allowed by the judge. It won't be allowed by the state. Because you've gotten yourself in and let them have at the question that should have never been a question that I'm asking you, as I told someone I'm helping here in a real important emergency that's popped up. Quit making questions about their wrongdoing. Don't ask, is it wrong for them to do it? Declare the crime. Don't cause a question. Declare the crime. We always had to tell, well, isn't that, what right do they have? They don't have any right. Say it's a crime. Declare what it is as a crime. If it's a crime, and if they have a right, then you can't. Most of the time, though, they're a trespasser. That's either a civil or a crime, depending on what they're attacking. This is a crime. Sustainable development is socially responsible economic development. That protects the resource base and the environment for the benefit of future generations. Not yours, not the current generation, even though they're supposed to regard the current generation. This is supposed to protect the environment for the benefit, this is a trust establishment here, of future generations. You want to tell me under this rule, who's the future generation that actually receives the benefit? If you're always going to be the present generation, who's the future generation to receive the benefit you're giving up everything for? That these people are now taken as a title to a property that they had no right to. Unless you believe the Pope, and he'll tell you that the Vatican or the Holy See, they have possession of the world, if you believe that. If you also then touch that to the Bible, it says that I think Satan has possession of the world, doesn't it? There might be some co-ownership problems there. You want to think about that little coincidence. But we're not going there. We're looking at the reality. We don't know when all that comes down, if it comes down that way. We don't even know that it comes down. I can just tell you the coincidence is there to show you that you're living in a criminal world, and you better fess up to the responsibility or succumb to it. That this is all done. Your slavery, social responsible economic development, is for the resource base and environment for the benefit of future generations. They don't tell you of who and of what, and whether or not that's even possible, but it's to the resource base. What are they always talking about if it's an economic development? You must be the economic slave unit. You're contributing to that resource base that they're plundering. This is right here. I'm just reading it from the Bar Association website, which they foster and encourage. This is at Agenda 21, for those of you paying attention, at Chapter 8.7. That's the security section that I keep talking about. It makes you a tenant on the property. Listen to the Pope. He's talking about you have a mortgage on you over the land. If you don't understand the consistency that the Bar Association has been promoting since like decades. Subsequent international conferences, including the 2002 World Summit of Sustainable Development in Johannesburg, South Africa, reaffirmed this concept of sustainable development. These conferences have built on the 1987 Brundtland Commission definition of sustainable development as, quote, the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's in direct contradiction to the statement prior that this is supposed to be the benefit for future generations, isn't it? See, they're trying to regard this, but this is still also under central control. So don't be persuaded that even if they give you something in the present generation, you're still not the slave that they're declaring that you are underneath human rights which they control. Remember, that gentleman did not have the right to not get cared for by the government, I think it was. They decided he didn't get any care, and that was not a violation of the Human Rights Declaration. Who did that but a court underneath this barred control? Sustainable development is intended to respond to the long-standing tension among economic, government, and social goals and objectives, including related and growing problems of environmental degradation and the gap between rich and poor. It is not about the environment alone. It is about the relationship between the environment and other human goals. It is not about the environment versus development. It is about the environment and development. Wow, there's a mouthful. I'm not going to be able to do this. I can already see it. If you don't understand that the economic, environment, and social tension is a fabricated condition, if you buy into that, you agree that they have the right to say the rest of this. And I'm not even talking about them going to human work unit slave monster. But it is about development. See, mining law is about taking the land and putting it to utilization. You have to develop it. Our work is development. That is now been oppressed, suppressed, denied at this point, while they are trying to steal back the land. So this is a lie. Their attorneys move through administrative agency, which is not property law. It's central bureaucratic authority that they all control. So this is a war where they attack development by imposing environment. It's a fabricated scenario. It's not reality. It's not a science. It's a trespass. It's a crime. And you can sit back and rely on it, or you can be persuaded that you don't know much, or you can just yak about it, or you can learn the tools to defeat it, which I hope you listen behind the woodshed together. And if I'm not speaking on certain things that you're doing, again, markonthebshow.com, I'll tell you what we have done if we've done anything, or maybe how to approach the problem if you have a problem. Otherwise, get at it. Laws and effective governance. So let's look, and is conjunctive. Laws and effective governance. In other words, these laws are not your established constitutional laws. This is by way of governance underneath the Model Business Corporation Act. Their laws are more like bylaws. They're like accessory laws. Advancing what? The agenda. Laws and effective governance are central to sustainable development. That's another sentence that should ring bells about what I tell you before. If you bring law and you cut out the governance, you will defeat sustainable development. If you bring law, it necessarily cuts out the governance, because your law is supposed to protect property, the existence of which cannot be governance. It's independent, exclusive possession, enjoyment, and control. In you, those that have it. So, law and governance are central to sustainable development. That's a definition. That's a clue as to the weakness, if you're learning how to read these documents. If you can take out, either use one against the other or take out one, you will defeat their ability to implement sustainable development. We ended up doing both. Actually did three things. Again, I'm reading this now for the first time in a way. This is certainly after we did our lawsuit. I was astonished to see all these things right there for us. This would have made the lawsuit maybe even easier. So it just perfected and confirmed we had been on target. All that research that was done, all the work that was done behind the scenes to bring us to the point was exactly attacking exactly the method that we said was the method. The same acts that they are relying upon to give them authority to advance a treason against the United States, at least, was what we talked about, that they admit in these resolution that they're resolving to bring on to you. Because governance is based largely on law. What law? Private law? Yes. Not public law. Not your law. Not constitutional law. Remember, there's public and private. Okay? They don't tell you which one here. So they hide themselves. That's transparent to you here if you didn't know that. Sustainable development raises profound challenges and opportunities for the rule of law and for lawyers. Boy, what a bunch to talk about there. I got to get going, though. Underlying all sustainable development efforts is the need for capacity building and infrastructure to support effective stakeholder engagement, issue identification, emotional and values conflict management, and the development of sustainable solutions to complex economic, social, and environmental challenges. Reflecting these realities, some have posited that all law should be sustainable development principles integrated into it. That just defines that all law is not sustainable development now, that it must be now integrated. And this means that this is how they're now integrating your de jure laws with those of this foreign agenda, if you allow it. This is what we tried to sue. What we did sue in one default judgment. We sued the implementation of sustainable development principles that tried to defeat and prohibit an act of Congress grant of property and enjoyment, possession and enjoyment, completely contrary to property. And they couldn't answer. And they couldn't. There's no way they can answer. But sustainable development is not merely another way of talking about environmental regulation. So, in fact, it is only about environmental regulation, and it is an attack on development, because a development is the antagonist to what they consider a world that needs to be rewilded. Any development is a sin in their religion. There will always be a tension between industrial development and protection of ecological and social environments. Just as I've really stated, they want to get rid of the industrial development. They want to rewild the world, and you're going to be focused put into little bitty places. And the bar association that rules your courts and your representation on the property, the defendants and the plaintiffs and the state are all there to control this, top and bottom. It's not merely another way of talking about environmental regulation. It is about the laws that affect the environment and social well-being. Not talking about your constitutional laws, is it? Many of the key principles underlying sustainable development are articulated in the Earth Summit, have a significant legal component. Not law, it's just what we can get you to believe. Applying sustainable development from a legal perspective means understanding, developing, and applying legal mechanisms that are relevant to the complex relationship among economic, social, and environmental priorities. This suggests a cross-functional approach at international, national, and local levels that integrates a variety of legal specialties, including environment, labor, property, tax, corporate, finance, international trade, and risk management. That's insurance, folks. But look, what part of life is not touched and going to be interfered with by this fabricated tension? You have to understand is your life. It's your way of life. Written right here in their own words. I'm emphasizing some words. Those are the words you write down. I know it's going fast, but take note of the words I emphasize. You'll see those words everywhere as this system is everywhere and advances itself and intrudes and metastasizes into every place you can see. And when you see those words, you need to step up and talk against it and act against it and actually move in force against it. And like I said, we did it through the system, but we also destroyed the ability for the system to respond, to take away their power. They didn't have any, and that's how we were able to do it. We don't assume they have power. They have to prove that power. And that was the remedy we chose, was a lawful remedy to force them to do that, and they failed. There will always be tension between industrial development and protection of ecological and social environments. No, there won't, folks. As soon as you take out this agenda, there's no more tension. You just develop, and you have your laws of property laws in the states and a neutral state court to balance the relative rights between parties. That's as simple as this whole thing has to be. What they're doing is they falsify a condition and they force that down your throat, which creates the lack of peace. See, it unsettles that which is settles. That is a breach of the peace. That's a crime, right in its face by definition. But the Bar Association, being illegal, doesn't understand that law. Thus, we need suitable systems and techniques in engaging diverse stakeholders, as well as managing and resolving the inevitable conflicts and disputes in order to achieve sustainable development objectives. What are the inevitable conflicts and disputes but those that are being trespassed against, acting against the trespass? They know they're coming to attack you. Sustainable thinking is not, actually, it's just a crime, but sustainable thinking is especially useful as a framework for addressing complex environmental development matters, usually involving multiple stakeholder interests and often with the significant domestic and international components. Well, remember, these stakeholders are not you and not your property, nothing of substance. It's the insiders that are going to be parasitically feeding off of you. The framework that I'm talking to you about is the same framework that's created in that story I talked to you about where they tell you that the Pope was a scientist. If you agree to the framework, you agree to be, your range of motion is confined to that frame. You need to redefine the frame. And that frame needs to put their frame inside a context of the criminality. That's how easy this really actually is. And I'm saying if we could just have more people doing this, I think it's over pretty quick. The importance of the law and good governance, the conjunctive, not just law. Law's not good enough here. Got to be good corporate governance involved. To sustainable development was emphasized in the 2002 by ABA President Robert H. Hirschhorn when he wrote to Secretary of State Colin L. Powell concerning the then upcoming World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg, South Africa. Hirschhorn wrote that, quote, "We strongly encourage the United States to promote inclusion in the plan of implementation and the political declaration of the WSSD at both a commitment by all governments to pursue domestic good governance and application to the rule of law at home and commitment to by the international community to provide the financial, technical, and other assistance needed to enable these national efforts." What was the only thing they talked about that they want to provide but financial assistance? The technical assistance is going to be how they're going to put the debt on you, the financial debt on you. They're asking about, they're advancing to the Secretary of State Powell that they want to put governance and the application of the rule of law at home, not government and law. They want to put corporate control by way of private rule of law. And this Secretary of State of the United States commits treason and says okay, essentially. In reply, Secretary Powell said the United States would support those commitments and expressed his appreciation for the ABA's efforts to foster, quote, good governance and the rule of law around the world. So your United States government is in it. They don't need the ABA. But who is the ABA to talk to these people either? See, it's all incestuously connected. I'm not saying it. I'm reading it from their own document. The important role of law and legal organizations in fostering sustainable development is also underscored by a series of meetings and conferences that occurred in South Africa before WSSD. These include the Global Judges Symposium on Sustainable Development and Environmental Law Conference sponsored by IUCN, World Conservation Union, Environmental Law Commission, an environmental law conference sponsored by South Africa's largest law firm and various international judicial and bar associations. Various international and judicial and bar associations. They're all the same. What global judges, folks? Did that pass you by? These include Global Judges Symposium. What global judges? And don't forget, long ago, the International Horde of Water Trespassers I identified for you in the IUCN.org, where you're going to find the United States government as member. That's where Lubchenco, I talked about Lubchenco years and years ago. I said she's the head of the, I think it was the Commerce Department. And they were looking for legitimacy in science, so-called, and so they absorbed the USGS and NOAA for the Commerce Department. So they could make science-based discussion, they could legitimize their plunder by throwing a color of science over the top. The IUCN was integrated in that. So here we have it, by their own documentation. I didn't know this until I read it right here, that in fact that it's integrated. Talk about integrated. It's integrated, and by their own document, supported by rule of law and governance. In other words, there's no government or law. It's rule of law, governance. It's global. And this is the democracy and rule of law is what they're trying to put on you. Democracy is essentially this social justice. You don't have a culture. It's going to be our culture, and that's it. Continuing ABA commitment. The ABA has this history of supporting the principles of sustainable development. In 1991, the House of Delegates adopted a resolution, quote, urging, quote, the United Nations and each nation of the world, quote, close quote, to, quote, develop and foster policies and long-term strategic plans for sustainable development and encouraging the betterment of human life through conservation and efficient use of natural resources. Let me touch that. Through conservation is non-use, folks. Conservation is non-use. They don't care about human life, even if you're a little monster. It's not to the betterment of human life unless they want human life dead. The non-use of natural resources is death. That's what they want for you. And efficient use of natural resources. The most efficient use that they see is the non-use. But how can you efficiently use something like minerals that are where they are and are needed as they're needed? And isn't the one digging those minerals out, the miner, someone like myself, who has under the grant given the right to decide what the most efficient and economical means by real capitalism is? In other words, I need to find out the most efficient and economical way to get those minerals out. Why isn't it good enough that you leave it to me to decide that? And wouldn't I do that for myself? Wouldn't I naturally do that for myself? Do you think I'd spend the most expensive way to get the metals out? Beat my head against my shovel or something until I got him beat out with my head because I didn't figure out it was more efficient to do it another way? Why are these people putting themselves into something they don't even have a clue about? Mining's a very special thing. It's a special skill. Miners are historically special people. They're just different. I don't even know that if I could actually meet the historic definition of what actual miners were able to do. But I am one nonetheless, at least in what I do. That they will take my better judgment over their non-experience and non-knowledge. Why? Because they don't want to develop, and they don't want me to develop, because if I got involved, all of a sudden there's going to be some economic development, and we'll show we don't need them. To show you that the complete fraud and facade about this whole thing, that this is not about efficient use of natural resources. That the most efficient way is to not use. It's like the most economic thing they can do in business is to create a slave. That's the most economic thing to business. And that's what you saw stated before in this document. They want to make you agree to behave responsibly, agree to their use of you for economic development. That's all it's saying right here again. But it's non-use, and it's to your death. The rewilding means there's no people. In 1992, the ABA helped the previous Bush administration prepare for the Earth Summit and participate in the Earth Summit by sending representatives to non-governmental organization sessions. That's the bar. Bar Association is a non-NGO, which you can only get if you sing the high praises to the UN and they issue that certification to you. Incestuous to no end, and you see the government, if those of you still holding on to Republican Party affiliation, if you think the Republicans are saints here, no, they're not. They're part and parcel to the whole problem. Why we sued both parties. Talk about being a political atheist. Absolutely. But these are partly why. This is the documents that confirmed everything I've researched, essentially, all coming out of the mouths of these people that we knew are hurting us, and we got to the point we found out it made no sense just to complain about it. We had to figure out a plan of action against their program of action. And we need more help. Everybody needs to be doing this. The House of Delegates has already adopted at least 2 other resolutions that are consistent with the basic principles of sustainable development. These are the principles of fraud, plunder on the world, and they agree with it. These people, as a membership, as an organization, agree with this. The Pope agrees with this. Boehner agrees with this. Obama agrees with this. The Republican parties agree with this. Most of your state officials, all your officials in government, agree with this. If you don't think you're already not infiltrated and surrounded, here it is. The 1999 House of Delegates resolution on legislation concerning cleanup of brownfields and 2001 resolution on environmental management systems recognize the important role law and policy can play in simultaneously furthering economic, environmental, and social objectives. So they admit here that they use law and policy, the conjunctive law and policy. This is administrative law, not law, it's law and policy, policing, to simultaneously further the 3-legged stool, dropping into the stinking abyss. More generally, promoting the rule of law internationally is a priority for the ABA. Now, why not? Because that's part and parcel to the promotion of sustainable development. This work takes a variety of forms. And this goes on to talk about more. I don't have time to say. I'm just going to you can read more of it here. I mean, the rest that I'm not reading, it just points out all these things you can find that are already written. All the international law I would find, not all of it. I didn't see all of it. A lot of it I saw that guided me along to say these things equate to mean this thing over here. And the thing I came up with by looking at this, and the thing that about anybody who does this comes up with, was what you're hearing here in this document. again, you do your path, you do it with truth in the right way. It leads you somewhere, and everybody that does that comes to the same stinking abyss. That the stinking abyss issues out as the proof in their own documentation. Importance of resolution to sponsoring committee sections. The Standing Committee on the Environmental Law, the policy conferences conducted by the Standing Committee in 1992, also serving as the official U.S. government hearing for United States preparation for the Earth Summit in 1994, addressing Agenda 21. This was not a secret to the bar, even though it was a secret to the United States. And those were people that were condemned to be heretics if you mentioned Agenda 21, those of you that were doing that. They admit in their old documents in 2003 it was existing. It is part and parcel again. And in 1996, examining the role of the private sector in sustainable development attests to the continuing high degree of interest in sustainable development concerns within the legal community. So the private sector, as they're talking about, is themselves. And why wouldn't they have supported it? A section on environment, energy, and resources, because sustainable development is not a discrete category like air quality or endangered species. So you now see the culprits and conspirators of law that are aiding this. The air quality laws, the water quality laws, the endangered species laws, and boy, you know that's a fact. These gangrene people using this to destroy the nation and development with them. These are part and parcel. The bar recognizes this. Your bar association lawyer, attorney, knows all about this stuff, whether or not he's trained specifically. This is the guidance he's been given in his continuing law education classes. They actually mention that in one of the documents. CLEs is what they do. So your mining lawyer is useless to you. He's actually a thief. But anyway, because the sustainable development is not a discrete category like air quality and endangered species, the overarching cross-cutting scope of the sustainable concept means that it is likely many committees within the section will increasingly address their specialized areas of interest within a sustainability framework. If they establish the frame and they confine you in it, your freedom is constrained by that frame. You have to break the frame or not get in it is the better thing, and put them in a criminal frame, and now they have to. Now their action is constrained. Their freedom and liberty is constrained by the one you point out in truth. There are at least 16 sectional committees for which there is a direct subject matter analog to a chapter in the Stumbling Toward Sustainability, a detailed assessment of the U.S. sustainable development efforts published in 2002. So there's a plan, and they admit it's stumbling because it's hit and miss. They don't know where you're going to step up and stop them and trip them. And they'll admit that this is a problem. This is that thing where they're doing an evaluation of the data they collect from all your electronic devices and wherever you go and all the little petitions that you file, and they look at all this stuff and they analyze it, and then they evaluate what they need to do with respect to how you're going and whether or not you see them. If you don't see them, they move quicker. If you do see them, then they got to figure out how to adapt and make it so you don't. This is their method. This is the method we sued to enjoin. The section of international law and practice. SILP's activities long have manifested a deep commitment to promotion of sustainable development. Long have manifested a deep commitment. Listen to what they're committing to here is deep. It's big. It's long. It's going to be unrelenting, I guess, in its force and effect, and it has been. You're witnessing it, whether you recognize that or not. You're witnessing this manifested deep commitment. The section continues to pursue rule of law training and technical assistance projects around the world. This is the CLE stuff. Its writings and programs focus on improvement and understanding of myriad aspects of international law and policy relevant and necessary to sustainable development, from investment, finance, and trade to human rights. Think about what they just said there as I've been analyzing this for you. They mostly talk about finance and trade to human rights. And I've told you your human rights are subject to the trade and the economic order. Didn't I say that? And they said it right there. The environment and health and human health. The human health is just enough to work you to death, because it's conditioned on the environment, isn't it? And you don't know what that environment is. You don't know what environment they want. They'll tell you that it's pretty flowers, but the environment they want is your debt slavery. SILP considers promotion of sustainable development an essential mission of the ABA and accordingly seeks to work creatively and collaboratively with other ABA entities to pursue this goal and enable ABA members to play active and effective roles. So they're seeking you out, they're destroying you. They work internally, collaboratively, as I said, to work as a cooperating agency or collaboratively or partnerships or as a stakeholder. You're working inside their own systems. They work within each other collaboratively. They cannot coordinate in the concept of law. That's two independent authorities working to meet each other's needs without violating the other. So if you don't get that point, you're missing how these words work, and you're missing how there's an alternative. I see the alternative as I'm reading as well. I wanted to point that part out. The section's founding of a CEELI and establishment of international legal resource. The center is collaboration with the United Nations Development Program reflect this commitment. So by the collaboration, you see that this whole setup is actually part of the UN. Just in that sentence. As I roughly read that, I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing, so I apologize. But something's not clearly looking. I get the monitors way too far away today for some reason. To reflect this commitment, SILP was pleased to initiate and coordinate ABA's participation in WSSD and efforts to work with the United States government before and since to promote and enable good governance and the rule of law. Well, they're promoting good governance and rule of law, and that means it's not actually lawfully part of the United States, actually. And then they say they initiate and coordinate something outside of the structure, which was this convention, WSSD, this Earth Summit. See, that was separate, not within. It was a conference where they had to meet with people outside the system. So here they coordinate to show you how this coordination and collaboration and cooperation agency works within the context of the law as we work with it. This is something real. This is not some ideas and just some words on a piece of paper. Conclusion. Let me see here. Yep, conclusion. This resolution is timely because it comes shortly after the September 2002 World Summit on Sustainable Development, in which the United States and other countries reaffirmed their commitment to sustainable development. This resolution is necessary because continued unsustainable development is not a prudent option. Now, I need to stop in the middle of this paragraph. Why would unsustainable development not be a prudent option? Because unsustainable development is anti-fraud and anti their scheme and artifice. It's anti their control. It's anti their governance. It's the antithetical condition of rule of law. Its objective basis properly applied. It's the truth and righteousness, if I can say it back to the biblical reference of the armor that you put on the shield. And when you bring this truth and this properly applied truth, the righteous way, the truth and righteously, it destroys these people. And that unsustainable, unfraudulent action is not a prudent option for them. Why? Because it kills them. It takes them out. This is what this is saying. That's why they go to this negative. This resolution is necessary because continued unsustainable development actions counter to what our agenda is not a prudent option. In other words, we have to continually focus their attention so they quit stumbling so much. This resolution is important to the ABA because it positions the ABA to play a significant role in the United States and internationally in supporting efforts to achieve sustainable development, including through partnerships with governments and other entities. And guess what? You have the Solutions Network. You have the Consensus Network, the Consensus Policy Network. This is all the little infrastructure they've built to advance all this stuff inside your governments. They're already saying they're working inside the government. Well, the bar is an agency of the government. They're here, folks. We're infiltrated and surrounded. Pretty formidable battle I think we're in. And here we have the ability that I'm reading this stuff to you to point out, this is not an opinion. This is not something that you can know. Should I dare say it's a conspiracy theory? You're a conspiracist. You're a heretic. No, this is them. This is the felons telling you that they're doing it to you on their own documentation. Telling you things they denied in the media, things they denied to you when you asked them, things that the state officials denied when you said, hey, wait a minute, what about this? And these administrative bureaucrats said, what about this policy over here that's part of the Johannesburg Treaty or Agenda 21? Oh, you don't know, you're a conspiracy theorist. It's been in the writings if you just had that as evidence. You don't have to be ashamed. That's the tool they use for you to not attack, be righteous in your action. You don't have to fear. And yet, we're told not to, and yet we do. That when I see this stuff, I'm saying, wow, I just wish a lot more people saw it. And then applied this stuff in the proper way. You don't have to go read all the stuff I'm talking to you to apply it. All you have to do is apply the parts that are there. You just have to say little bits and pieces. You don't have to lots. And so, I don't know if I've got enough time. We've got like a few minutes. Let me see how much I highlighted on this very last document. It's quite a bit. Let me see what I can do. Maybe I can get through it. American Bar, another last document. Now, this is 2013. We bring it on up. Resolved that the American Bar Association reaffirms its 1991 and 2003 commitments to sustainable development. So here we are, right up front, talking to the fact of the lineage. This is an evidentiary chain that shows one act after the next, after the next, after the next. That there's no denial that this is intended, knowing, that's the criminal side, and wanton and willful on the civil side, and other things. That resolved that the American Bar Association reaffirms the 1991-2003 commitments to sustainable development, defines sustainable development as, quote, the promotion of an economical, socially, and environmentally sustainable future for our planet and for the present and future generations. And you know, they didn't care about the present. You're only going to have future. And this is for the planet. This is for the planet. This is how they're adjusting this as the Pope is coming to the stage. Further resolved, you don't think that they're not kissing somebody's behind here. Further resolved that the American Bar Association urges all governments, lawyers, and ABA entities to act in ways that accelerate progress towards sustainability. Accelerate. I told you the bums rush is coming. It's right here in this document. Further resolved that the American Bar Association encourages law schools, legal education providers, and others concerned with professional development to foster sustainability in their facilities and operations to help promote a better understanding of the principles of sustainable development in the relevant fields of law. Well, what's relevant fields of law but merely and only administrative policy impositions? We run out of time here. Introduction. Sustainable development is in context. Sustainable development has its origins in the conservation and environmental movements in the United States and other countries, in the laws that were adopted because of those movements, and in the lawyers that drafted and worked with clients to implement these laws. They've been a part of the plunder the whole time, but see, this is not really part of the laws, because the laws of property require our antithetical chapter 8 that they referred to before. And this is about conservation and environmental movements. Maybe bowel movements as well, because it stinks to high heaven. It's a stinking abyss, as I say. Conservation is the non-use of a thing. It's totally antithetical to the property disposal laws of the country of the United States, where property law is concerned. You don't non-use your property. In fact, if you look at water law, if you waste it by non-use, that's a crime. That this comes contrary to those principles that we ought to be living and not be attacked under. Long before the UN Council Conference on Environment and Development in Rio, UN said Earth Summit, for example, the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 declared a national policy, quote, to create and maintain conditions under which man and nature can exist in productive harmony and fulfill the social, economic, and other requirements of present and future generations of Americans. That's a little different than cutting out everybody but the future generations, isn't it? They actually speak to having to acknowledge underneath law production, productive harmony. They want to fulfill social, economic, and other requirements, but the requirement is that in balance underneath the federal requirement, because Congress has this obligation, it balances in favor of man's environment. The word environment is bifurcated. It means nature's, when you see the word environment under NEPA, it means nature's environment. It also means man's environment. They're distinct difference, and when you get the facts and the reality over both environments, they are to in the balance. When you finally balance them, man's environment shall not suffer. At least not we're not impracticably able for the agency to say there was nothing else we could do. This is not a carte blanche license for eco-terrorist conservation, environmental causes, to use the NEPA to kill man's environment. It's not right, but you see the seat of decision says is a judge, a bar member. And they will try to pass this is why you have to assert your rights and you have to know how to attack the condition. They will try to pass what this system, the sustainable development is, that it is law. It's not. If we were to get a bunch of people to step up and apply this point right here, enforcing man's environment in the bifurcation of NEPA, where we insist on productive use of our lands and not conservative or non-use of the lands, we will defeat this whole thing. It's truly, I've got a lot more to read. I didn't get through the last document. I will probably pick this up next week. But if you can pick this last little bit up and start to actually say, this is the truth, this is the reality, and this is the proper application, we will no longer suffer. This Pope goes home. In shame. And until we've stepped up into doing that, the bum's rush will run us down. There's enough of it, organized enough right now, that it's going to be a whirlwind of destruction coming on us. So I don't think I can get on to any more. I think actually that's a good point to stop. The NEPA is not a license to plunder man's environment. Land, soil disposal, productive uses, and development are the law of the land in America. If you would all just know that and step up and assert that in a simple statement, and then persist against those that would trespass it, we would stop a lot, at the local level certainly, would stop a lot of this nonsense, and then we would out the main player that is a seated decision in your life, the Bar Association. There's not one entity that will involve themselves that will not go to a bar member first, but under fear of reprisal by the system itself, to get the answer from the attorney of what the answer is. And the answer is the fulfillment of sustainable development. If you understand that and you understand what's going on, you can then have the tools to counter the systemic corruption, the infrastructure that's already in place against us in this battlefield America that they've expanded to be the planet. Understand this agencies, this government, this governance corporate status is already speaking to the planet. It's the same thing the Pope speaks to. We're going to get to that next week. I'm going to talk about that 2030 thing. I'll show you exactly where it shows that this is a debt imposition plunder on the planet, that the Pope comes under the support of those that are in poverty to push austerity on everybody else. And that's you. So thank you for tuning in today. Please donate where you can to those in the websites, reallibertymedia.com, for Grimner and the servers and his help for the website, Jules at ucy.tv, Grammy Mary and WT, worldtruth.org, a social network. Join up. They're where the servers are coming from. They're the ones that should pay that bill. If you could donate to that, appreciate it. And all the broadcasters that are out there, I appreciate you carrying the broadcast. See you next week.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.